To be a Unitarian Universalist is to sign up for a lifetime of being religiously misunderstood, sometimes by your own self. I know you've been in a situation where you've tried to describe what it is you do on Sunday morning. Yeah, I'm going to church on Sunday, but it's not like other churches. I mean, it is like other churches. It's really old. It looks like a church. We meet on Sundays. But, like, it's cool. Like, you know, they have gay people, you know. And the minister's trans. That counts for some points, right? Why do we have a minister if we aren't like other churches? Great question. I'm not really sure. But he does talk to us on Sunday mornings, and not like in a mean way. What do we believe? Well, I can tell you what we don't believe, which is that we don't believe in going to hell. So that's cool, right? We support progressive things. Yep. I swear I'm not trying to convert you. And so on. So if this happens to you, imagine what it's like for me as a minister. The first thing that usually happens when someone finds out that what I do for a living is apologize for swearing, even if I literally just told them that I let my 5-year-old listen to Cardi B. Then sometimes they're confused about how I could have a wife. I'm not a Catholic priest, but okay. And sometimes they're concerned about if I'm okay with LGBTQ people. My wife was once out with a coworker and told them she was married to a minister, and one asked her, would he be okay with doing a gay wedding? And she answered, well, he's trans, so I certainly hope so. But it isn't always funny. I was working at as a hospital chaplain once, and when I entered a room of a woman who was about to go into surgery, and there was another woman in the room next to her, holding her hand, and they were having a tender moment. And when I asked how they knew each other, there was this pause. We're friends, she said, hesitantly. My eyes looked down. Did that just happen? Did they conceal their relationship around me? Because I was a chaplain? It broke my heart. You know, people have weird feelings about religion. You might have even just bristled at the fact that I used the word religion right there. But I do understand us as a religion, maybe not in the way that we have so often been taught about it here in the United States, but a religion that has a rich history and centers on love and sharing our values. But I get it, feeling weird about religion. And we're sitting here, right, in seeming contradictions with pride flags in this old sanctuary and toys and noises of children, with values that tell us that no one is outside the circle of love, that you don't have to do anything to be saved, where we try to practice being the people we are, where we come together through covenant, not creed. And sometimes we fail, and we try again. And here's the thing, even when it's awkward, sometimes people do need to hear about who we are and what we do. Speaking for myself, Unitarian Universalism has saved me time and time again. I have no idea what my life would be like if Unitarian Universalism wasn't a part of it, guiding me in everything I do. But it's hard to explain and talk about it. Here's another example. I was sitting with the dad of a friend of my son's yesterday at the playground, and he asked me what I do. I'm a Unitarian Universalist minister. I paused. Do you know what Unitarian Universalism is? Sure, he said, you're the only cool Christians. Well, that's not really right. I struggled because I didn't want to spend time correcting him, because we had literally never had a conversation before. But also it wasn't right. Anyhow, during the conversation where I told him a little bit about what Unitarian Universalism is, he stumbled over the name and called it Universal Unitarianism on more than one occasion. As he stumbled to get out the words, he laughed. I had the pleasure of getting to tell him not to worry about it. After all, the sermon I was working on is called Unitarian Universalism is a really long name. It's true, he said, What is up with that? So before I explain what is up with that, I want to tell you that I got the title from basically the only kids book that attempts to describe what Unitarian Universalism is. It's called Unitarian Universalism is a really long name, which I think is a cute title, but I don't think it's a very good book, especially for kids, although it's just a lot of facts, really. You know, it's not a story, and I'd love to find more interesting ways to tell the stories of our faith in a book for kids. And of course, I'm complaining, but I have no intentions to write this myself. So kudos to the person who wrote this for putting this out there, and I'm sorry to knock the book. But I do really love the title, because it's something I've thought about for a long time myself. I mean, think about it. When we go out in the world and try to describe something, anything about our religion to Christians, Jews, Muslims, Buddhists, we have to use two words that nobody really knows what they mean, including many of us. In fact, those two words are so long that we all often shorten it to the even more confusing acronym of UU. And get this, when I was in seminary, graduate school for ministers, my word processing program didn't even recognize universalism as a word. So I had to add it to the program. That's how obscure and esoteric these words are. But why is the name so long and confusing? Well, let me tell you the story of how we got our name. Unitarian Universalists are the inheritors of two Christian traditions, Unitarianism and Universalism, both of which were radical theological ideas that upended what it meant to be a Christian in ways that challenged the status quo and pushed them to work for justice and ultimately led them to become one. The Unitarians believed in a singular God, as opposed to believing in the Trinity, which is the idea of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. The Unitarian idea would hold that Jesus wasn't God, God's self, in the same way that many Christians think of him. Now, there are people who have believed this since the beginning of Christianity. These beliefs were often persecuted. But what's really interesting is that as Unitarian beliefs began to take hold in the United States in the 18th and 19th centuries, the word Unitarian was often used as a derogatory term. It was literally used as a more specific synonym for heretic, as in, oh, you know Kathy, she's a Unitarian. There's a lot of conflict in churches at this point. People are starting to call each other that in their churches and pointing fingers and making names. And it was around then, those who were more conservative in their beliefs, the people who held the belief that they were more Puritan in nature, that believed very strongly in that Trinity of God. So those were part of them. And then there were those who were liberal in their theology. So yeah, Unitarianism was meant as kind of a mean thing to say about someone. And then it was reclaimed. William Ellery Channing gave a sermon in 1819 called Unitarian Christianity, where he said, you want to say I'm a Unitarian? You know what? I am. And here's what I mean by that. It was about more than just the oneness of God. He stated that the Bible, though important, was written by and for humans, to be studied with reason and logic. And that if you study it from that perspective, you will see that Jesus was not the same as God, and that there's only one God, a perfect, loving God, not a vengeful God, and that all people should be treated with compassion. And some of these ideas are things we still connect with today. And this is when being a Unitarian became something that people started to identify themselves with, and with pride. And 6 years later, the American Unitarian Association was born. Now, I think it's kind of cool that a word that was reclaimed by our spiritual ancestors became something that we use even today to describe who we are. The word universalism has a less interesting story. Again, there have been people who have been universalists since the beginning of Christianity, but it was something that really emerged and took hold in North America. And our precursors practiced Christian universalism, which emerged around the same time as Unitarians in the late 18th century. It was this idea that ultimately all people would be redeemed from sin, that all people get to heaven and were reunited with Jesus, no matter what a person believes, if they are practiced a different religion, or if they lived a life full of sin, they will be saved. Universal salvation. And because it was universal, it was called universalism. Again, these beliefs caused universalists to focus on the fact that all people were part of God's love and would ultimately be reunited in heaven with Jesus. They focused on some of those issues in our worlds as well. And in fact, they were the ones who ordained one of the first women to be clergy, Olympia Brown, in 1863. And these beliefs have been carried and translated to us today. We believe that all people are part of that circle of love. So there were Unitarians and there were Universalists. And so how did we become Unitarian Universalists? In the late 19th and early 20th century, there were decades of conversation and discussions and votes between the two organizations, the American Unitarian Association and the Universalist Church of America. Both of them recognized that they were fundamentally different from all the other Christian churches. The youth actually merged much sooner than the denominations, because we should follow our youth. And it was just as fraught as you might imagine. Individual churches were able to give their own opinions on whether or not they wanted this to happen. And interestingly, this church, which had been Universalist at the time, voted against the merger multiple times. There were a lot of concerns about this merger. There were way more Unitarian churches, for example, than Universalist churches. So the Universalists were afraid of losing their identity. Nevertheless, the denominations consolidated and became one in 1961. And when they did so, they needed to decide on a new name. The Unitarian Universalists were born. And we became a religion distinct from Christianity, with Christian roots based around shared values. A really radical idea at the time and today. So why does this all matter? How important is this to who we are today? Well, you can see the threads of Unitarianism and Universalism in our shared values and who we are. The most important of our values today is love. We put love at the center of all we do, a love that holds us fiercely and compels us to work for a better world, a love that challenges us to live our values every day. Reverend Sophia Betancourt, president of the Unitarian Universalist Association, says, "It's not enough to simply say that love lives at the center of our tradition. We must ask what it means to live as if love itself mattered." This is central to our theology. And maybe some of us bristle at that word, theology. You might think that theology is about beliefs about God, and you'd be right, partially. And since we very explicitly don't tell you what to believe about God, how can we have a theology? Well, UU minister Reverend Dr. Sherry Prudhomme defines theology as being about the nature of being human, how we are related to all that exists, how we are related to the ultimate ground of being, and how we understand the horizon towards which all life is oriented. So in a sense, what we are doing here is always theology. We have from our forebears a theology that embraces the idea of change, that is willing to be heretics, the historical Unitarians, to say the things that are hard to say, to be different in our theology, because our theology views all life as sacred in and of itself, not because of some external God. It pushes us to work for justice, to be in those uncomfortable situations. It tells us that the work is never finished. For me, I use my Unitarian theology all week as I live my life and make my decisions. I'm a UU when I pick my kids up from school and talk to them about their days. I'm a UU when I read the news and wonder about what I can do to help. I'm a UU when I go to a protest to protest our ICE policies and what's happening in this country. I'm a UU when I talk to my partner about how we want to use our money. I'm a UU when I go in the voting booth, like I did this week, and voted with my values. I'm a UU when I feel scared and need a place to go to for community. I'm a UU when I come to church and surround myself with music and song and readings and words and you. In each of these moments, I'm practicing UU theology, one that comes from our inheritance of recognizing that all people are a part of God's love, however you do or don't define God. That could be a whole other sermon. This week, I asked my daughter what religion we are. I said, what religion are we? And she said, peace. Because let's be real, Unitarian Universalism is a really long name. But when I said Unitarian, she followed it with Universalist. And I said, yes, we are Unitarian Universalist, at least right now you are. And she said, I wish everyone was a Unitarian Universalist. Why? Because we are trying to make the world a better place. Now, of course, we live in a world where we will never convert everyone to Unitarian Universalism, nor should we. It's not something we should try doing. The difference and respect for other religions is central to who we are as UUs. But it is true that we are trying to make the world a better place. So yes, we might be misunderstood. And yes, Unitarian Universalism is a really long name. But it is who we are. A religious tradition with deep roots that holds love at the center, that tries to make the world a better place, where there is a place for you. May it be so, and let us say together, Amen.